Much of Philippine history has focused on great men of history, larger-than-life personages behind major turning points in the national narrative. But in the shadow of these towering figures lived transitional figures who were thought to be in the margins of our long history. These lives and stories of small people, no less extraordinary even in their comparative obscurity, are diligently traced by historians Luciano Santiago and Lino Dizon, who devoted themselves to easing out the details of these fine threads of our national memory. Encomenderos and hacenderas, beatas and babaylans, priests, poets, and painters. The names featured in Dr. Luciano Santiago's historical writing would be unfamiliar to many Filipinos. Their life stories are not a retelling of climactic events, but rather an uncovering of memories as pieced together from obscure records and archival documents, family histories, baptismal records, marriage certificates, legal records, last wills and testaments, and testimonials from family and friends. A psychiatrist by profession, Dr. Santiago had a deep understanding of the vagaries of human nature and how these revealed their personalities. Philippine Genealogy and Art History, the Luciano Santiago Reader collects his most valuable essays on the hidden figures and unexplored corners of national memory. Among Dr. Santiago's favorite subjects were the genealogies of Filipino nobility, families and individuals such as the so-called Brown Knight, Don Nicolas de Herrera, and Doña Teresa de la Paz, the last Hacendera. Through extensive research, he traced family histories of Filipino Principalia, who once occupied a prominent place in pre-colonial society before being incorporated into the Spanish system of social hierarchy. Dr. Santiago's research revealed how families in their own right can influence the history of their community.
Well, if you're interested in tracing your family history, in tracing your ancestry, that's when you begin to appreciate history and historical research. Because by and large, even if this is an individual project focused very narrowly on your ancestry, you're actually doing historical research. And then you begin to understand history and its impact on family and on your particular ancestry when you begin to do more research. No? When you look at old newspapers, you go to censuses, you go to baptismal records and all that. Chances are you will be able to reflect on on your ancestors and begin to wonder how they adjusted to the events in their surrounding them and in their locality or even in the nation at large. And that's I think that's the best contribution to that genealogy can do to our understanding of history.
Dr. Santiago also devoted much of his writing to documenting the lives of Filipino firsts, such as the first native or mestizo clergy, women founders of religious orders, delegates to the Spanish Cortes, jurists, doctors, pharmacists, scholars, artists, writers, printers, and other Filipinos who broke new ground in their fields. Among these pioneers, Dr. Santiago shed light on many trailblazing women whose contributions to history are so often overlooked. He also shone a light on the close connection between the literary and religious worlds. Santiago focused on native beatas, or lay religious women of the 18th century who wrote, Their writings survived because they were sent to the Madrid court with its highly developed archival system. These writings took the form of petitions and historical accounts of religious congregations. Other works consisted of prayer books and missals in Tagalog and other native languages. Doña Luisa Gonzaga de Leon became the first published Filipino woman author in the mid-19th century when she wrote Ejercicio Cotidiano, a book of daily devotions translated from the Spanish language. Her poignant prologue to this book of prayers, written in her native Kapampangan, shows a poet's inclination. Dr. Santiago devoted his scholarship to uncovering the writing of women like Luisa Gonzaga de Leon, Ignacia del Espiritu Santo, and many others down the years. He also focused on women like pioneering Doña Remigia Salazar Talusan, Viuda de Lopez, the first Filipino publisher and printer. In Dr. Santiago's view, these women were instrumental in the development of Philippine arts and letters during the Spanish colonial period.
To start with, he was not a historian. I think he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, if I remember correctly. But he was steeped in research, primary source research. He could read Spanish and read it very well, which is an important tool for anyone trying to trace history, because a large part of Philippine history and Philippine records are written in Spanish. And as a result of that, if you do not have appropriate knowledge, functioning knowledge of the Spanish language and of the way words were written, of the penmanship, the manuscripts that you find, for example, in the National Archives, then you will not be able to do what Dr. Santiago did. Dr. Santiago's research also focused on people who are not necessarily not leading the nation in that sense. He did not look at national heroes. He did not look at the large, big names, as it were, the big men of Philippine politics. Rather, he looked at the religious associations, the religious congregations, individuals in these religious congregations, people that anyone barely remember or even know, but contributed to the growth and development of religious organizations and Christianity in the Philippines. In that sense, Luciano P.R. Santiago contributed much to shedding light on an unwritten and unpublished aspect of Philippine religious history or Philippine and Christianity.
Apart from the women writers and native religious who were key to the development of Philippine letters, another highly significant factor worthy of study was the printing firm Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier. In the years leading up to the period of intellectual enlightenment that produced the illustrado movement in the late 19th century, the Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier, or IRG, was greatly responsible for the production of modern knowledge about the Philippines. Founded in 1858 by noted typographer Don Manuel Ramirez y Carvajal and lithographer artist Baltazar Giraudier y Ortega, the imprenta laid out the themes and perspectives for nascent Philippine studies with the books, pamphlets, and other publications produced over its almost 3 decades of existence. The foundational influence of this publishing firm, its founders, and the writers and editors who helmed it over the years is limned in careful detail by Dr. Lino L. Dizon in his new book, Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier. As a pioneering local historian and author of numerous books on the history of his native Tarlac, as well as Pampanga, Pangasinan, Cavite, and other provinces, Dr. Dizon has long been devoted to raising awareness of lesser-known figures in local and national history.
Del Pan, the so-called Decano de la Prensa Filipina during that flimsy colonial period, started out as the editor-in-chief of the resuscitated Diario de Manila in the 1860s and the pioneering Revista de Filipinas in 1875, both owned by Manuel Ramirez, the former printer of the old UST Press, and Baltazar Giraudier, the popular lithographer at that time, the tandem behind the publishing firm whose history is now being published by Vibal. Said publications, edited by Del Pan, were stalwarts in nascent Philippine studies and libertarian ideas, and rightfully greatly contributing in what the present publication is trying to mark, the Renacimiento Filipino, the Philippine Renaissance.
In his book, Dr. Dizon gives an overview of the history of print and publishing in the Philippines prior to the founding of the IRG in 1858. The press was an important medium, allowing Filipinos to discuss the state of the country and bring about political action. Filipino illustrados like Rizal, De los Reyes, Paterno, Ponce, and others started out as novice journalists for Spanish-language newspapers in Manila and Spain. One of the most influential names in the roster of early writers and redactores or editors of the IRG was the peninsular Jose Felipe del Pan. Del Pan's work was influenced by his dissatisfaction over intellectual life in the Philippines upon his arrival in the country. He complained that people spent all their time on idle gossip and lacked an interest in the greater world around them. But later on, economic growth led to the opening of cafes and theaters that encouraged a more vital and open-minded social scene. By 1875, these changes in society were seen by Del Pan as a period of renacimiento or renaissance, inspiring him to declare in an issue of Revista de Filipinas. It was Del Pan's drive and influence as an editor and writer at IRG that helped usher in this renaissance, revitalizing the pursuit of knowledge in the late 19th century Philippines. By incorporating science, literature, and the arts in his writings, Del Pan was able to give readers a deeper understanding of the state of the country. He traveled through the interior of central Luzon, immersing himself in local communities. His in-depth field research set his work apart from writers who portrayed the country from a tourist's perspective. Dr. Dizon provides an authoritative listing of the publications of the Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier, including the Ilustración Filipina, the Revista de Filipinas, and the Diario de Manila. Within the pages of these influential periodicals, Del Pan chronicled figures like missionary Father Juan Perez de Santa Lucia, road builder Don Jose Maria Peñaranda, and the progressive Governor-General Ramon Solano, using biographical writing as a way to convey broader ideas about the country. By releasing a series of annotations, translations, and re-editions, Del Pan used his position as an editor and newspaper director to give the reading public access to important information on Philippine administration, economy, and more. He provided a vast pool of knowledge on early Philippine studies covering such wide-ranging topics as prehistory, folklore, anthropology, and women's education. Decades after the founding of the Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier, The impact of this publishing firm and its visionary editor, Jose Felipe del Pan, could be felt in the maturing of Filipino intellectuality that manifested in the propaganda movement and ultimately the Philippine Revolution.
The firm was also responsible for that unbeatable illustration Filipina, Florante at Laura, by Francisco Balagtas, the republication of dictionaries and grammars in various Philippine languages, including those of Fray Diego de Berganio in the Pampangan language, and hundreds of titles that greatly contributed to the ushering of the illustrado and intelligentsia class, like Inawa Rizal, Plaridel, Isabelo de los Reyes, Anacleto del Rosario, Mariano Ponce, and others. Thus, my present project with Vibal is focused on the production of knowledge and what we call intellectual development of that period through publications in the experience of the publishing firm, which is now mostly forgotten, the Imprenta de Ramirez y Giraudier. This is a topic that the Vibal Foundation and myself believe is very much lacking and wanting in Philippine colonial scholarship.
The saga of Philippine arts and letters over the centuries of Spanish rule is an interweaving of different threads. The iconic writers and revolutionaries, known to all, did not emerge fully formed, but were shaped by the influence and legacy of transformational figures who, notwithstanding their obscurity, embodied history-making change. With their path-breaking publications, both Dr. Luciano P.R. Santiago and Dr. Lino L. Dizon have not only resurrected liminal figures, but have vividly woven a rich tapestry of our splendid and exhilarating culture.